Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on The Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Sides podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, wegovy, or Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to The Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault. Welcome to the Plus Sides Podcast. Hey, Bear.
Hey, what's up?
Bear the Extraordinaire is my co-host today, while our dear cat is taking a much needed break with some things that she's got going on. So I'm glad to have you here with me. For those of you that don't know, because Bear is usually behind the scenes, he is my husband and our editor extraordinaire. And he protects me so that I look good and sound good, which we all know is not always the case. So it's so lovely to have him with us co-hosting today. I figure we'll do quick intros if you're new here. If you're not new here, this is your cue to fast forward, right? Like if you already know all this jazz, but we get, hundreds of people that find us every week. Okay. So my name is Kim, and this is the Plus Sides Podcast. Our podcast is focused on education and advocacy around really metabolic disease in general, and kind of all of the different things that comes into play with that. Okay. And we dig deep and we interview doctors and scientists and experts, as well as people in our community. And we combine the lived experience and the patient voice, but also the science to be able to validate, how we got here, how we get better, right? So that we can learn more and, of course, be able to heal and grow. Okay. So we're so glad to have you here. Our podcast is a very trusted source because I know there's a lot of stuff out there, guys. Okay. We've won lots of awards. We're ranked in the top 1% of all podcasts in the world. So you have chosen the right place. I have obesity. I have had it the majority of my adult life, like honestly, even in high school, and always struggled with food noise, even as early as the age of 8. I have been on every diet that there is. And even though I was very successful in lots of areas of my life, I could never figure out why I couldn't be successful as controlling something as simple as my food when it seems like everybody else was. Turns out everybody else was not. They were all just faking it too. But there are some people who are better at it. So when I tried GLP-1s, the food noise turned off for me. And as the very curious person that I am, I needed to know everything about it. And then I needed to tell everyone. And that's how this podcast got started. Okay. I dropped a total of 110. I still live in a bigger body. I've never been a small person at all. But I am a much healthier person. And that is the goal. And honestly, mind, body, spirit, all the things. But I also talk about the realities. Okay. And the realities are that you may not end up in a small body. And we talk about why that is and how this metabolic disease and dysfunction works. It's just multifactorial, very complicated. Okay. So we think that you deserve to know all of that because we're kind of tired of doctors talking over our heads and behind our backs, and we're ready to be in the room, right? And take part and be a part of our care. So that's what this podcast is about. And we're going to talk about that today. Bear the Extraordinaire, also on GLP-1, but I'll let him do his own intro.
Well, I am Bear the Extraordinaire. I am normally on the back end, as she said, making her look good and making Kat look good. Yeah. I have been on the GLP-1 journey with my lovely wife for the last 3 years, she's 3.5, 4, I'm 6 months behind her. I have actually reached my goal weight. Actually, I went under my goal weight. So I am actually trying to gain some weight. Recently had some health scares that came up, but all in the clear with all of that. So I'm just getting back into things and glad to be doing something today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here, honey. I will tell you, Bear and I have both now lost our gallbladders, and that sucked.
Yes.
And mine, I mean, I think everybody knows it's like the gallbladders are the, what is it, the 4Fs or 5Fs, like female, fluffy, fertile, like all these different things. So, you know, our surgeon told us that, or told me that it was the fluctuation in estrogen and that we store a lot of estrogen in our fat cells. Bear didn't have tons of stones like I did. And they said mine was like dice, which, you know, tracks, I think, probably if you've been on a diet since you were 8, you know, but, you know, and, but Bear his was infected. So we got his out and he's just healing from that. When I left the hospital the first time, because it's very weird to leave a hospital without an organ. It's weird. And it was at Christmas time and I kept saying that I wanted to name it Kevin because I was like, Kevin, because I left it in the hospital. And so when Bear lost his, I was like, we have to name your gallbladder too. And I said, he's like, but I don't know what to name it. And I was like, I don't know, something from Star Wars. And then he was like, no. And I go, well, you've got to name it something from like a show or a movie, right, that you've watched where someone got lost, right? Whether you found them or not. So Bear, what is your gallbladder that is now wherever it is? What is its name?
It's Alderaan.
Alderaan. And Alderaan is who?
For those who know, they know.
You have to tell people that don't know.
No,
you have to spread the knowledge.
No.
All
For
right.
those who know, they know.
And Kevin are no longer in the building and we're feeling much better. So he just got his done. So that's why I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about. Yep. All right. So today we have an interesting, I hope that you guys, I think that you guys who've been with me for a while understand that I will handle things that are maybe a little more controversial with care because your well-being is the most important thing. Okay. Mental, physical, all the things. But I do feel, and I've told you a lot lately, that because of the way that the algorithm works, it tends to work in a way where it's kind of reaffirming what we want it to say in our own bias all the time. And then we may miss really important things. And so I have gotten far enough, I think, on my healing journey where I'm ready to talk about the food. Okay. I didn't want to make food the villain, you know, and it turns out I think there's a whole lot of villains in this story, if you will. But I think that there's a lot of things we got to discuss around nutrition and around movement. And I think even around like what we talked about recently when we had someone on for the fat liberation movement, right? Trying to discuss these things that are harder topics with the goal to just better understand, right? Not to, you know, necessarily take offense, although there will be times when that happens, right? But just try to understand because all the way things work with most of these shows and even with like, you know, the news and the media and all these different things, right? It's that everybody kind of gets their sound bites and their talking points. And there was probably a lot of really good stuff there before they cut it to make something sing on social. And so I just think that a lot of really good points get missed. And there's a lot of things that we don't hear details about. So today we're going to talk about food science, huh? Yep. Does that sound good? Yep. All right. So everybody get in a safe place. Okay. We're going to talk about all the things food science. Hang with us as I invite in our special guest. Okay. Here we go. Hi, Liam.
Hello, Liam.
Hey, Kim. Hey, Bear. How are y'all doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Good.
Beautiful.
We're glad to have you. Glad to have you. What we usually do, Liam, when we start out the show is we ask a little bit about who you are and how you help people, right? So that people could be the companies, right, that you consult for, or maybe down way you're trying to help people with food, you know, however that is. So if you could just tell our community a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Liam Kincaid. I am a food scientist. I do a few things. I own my own food science consulting business, Apothix LLC, where I basically assist mostly small food businesses like mom and pop coffee shops, all the way up to small package CPG companies, mostly with food innovation and process optimization. Basically just like super fancy talk for like, I try to make food a little bit like more exciting for people and
Yeah.
also help businesses run more efficiently. But doing that at a scale that is historically, small mom and pop restaurants, small CPG companies, they typically don't have access to technical expertise like large CPG companies or global food manufacturers do.
Mhm.
So I try to bring a little bit of that sort of global expertise from like the broader food industry down into local communities and stuff like that. But aside from that, or aside from my own work for Apothix, I am a food scientist for Cargill, which is one of the largest food corporations globally. If you're at all someone who's interested in commodity trading, they're the CEO of the ABCs. Yeah, it's the ingredients from that business is rather ubiquitous in the food industry. You'd be very hard pressed to go into any grocery store and find a product that doesn't contain something made from Cargill. So,
yeah. Wow,
so,
you're a busy guy. So I like that. You're working for the big guys, but also trying to help the little guys. That's cool. You used an acronym that it might be good if you explain what that is for our people because they may not understand the food industry.
Okay, so the ABCs.
Well, ABCs, and then also you mentioned the type of restaurants.
Oh, okay, sure. Sorry. So CPG is consumer packaged goods. So that basically just means anything like from Pringle cans to Doritos to like microwavable meals found in the freezer section, anything that's found on grocery store shelves that is a packaged good and meant to be sold at retail is considered a consumer packaged good. And the companies that make those sort of products are usually called like CPG companies. The ABCs, I'm not one who's really into commodity trading myself. The C stands for Cargill, I know that. But I believe the B is for Bayer, who is a very large agricultural. I think they make a lot of insecticides and pesticides and stuff like that. That side of agricultural, and then A, I always forget who it is. Not super important, but yeah. So hopefully that kind of cleared a little bit of that up.
Yeah, it does. So what is a food scientist?
Yeah. So
what do you do?
Oh, go ahead. So I specialized, at least at Cargill, I specialized in bakery applications. So my main customer demographic, if you will, or the companies that I help and work with are usually companies that specifically make baked consumer packaged goods. So I work on anything from donuts to pastries to cakes to icings to different food systems like that, ice creams, and then, which is not a baked good, but it's used a lot in tangential applications. And then I also do some work for Cargill-owned consumer packaged goods companies. So I've done some work with stevia sweeteners for the Truvia brand, and as well as some salt reduction work for Diamond Crystal Kosher salt.
Okay. So are you doing science on those things? Like what equals the science?
So food science is, in my opinion, one of the most broad and sort of like ambiguous fields to get into because we kind of have, at least when we're going through school, we have to learn a lot of different things, everything ranging from nutrition to microbiology to food chemistry to biochemistry, business, supply chain, stuff like that. So it's kind of a lot of stuff that we have to know in terms of actually being proficient at our jobs. But ultimately, the actual science part of it comes from, it could come from anything from just like, hey, my company makes icings, for example, and we're noticing that after 2 months, we're getting sufficient mold growth or something like that. And we're getting a lot of customer complaints about it. What can we add to our formulation, or how can we redo our formulation to basically improve shelf life stability and something like that? And in that case, we would look at stuff like, okay, well, what's your emulsifier system? What is your water activity? What is your mold prevention system, if you have any? And then kind of make recommendations based off of those sort of factors that we consider.
Fascinating. Okay, very interesting. Cool. Well, one of the reasons I reached out to you is because my FYP put you in front of me. And you had made a video specifically on TikTok, which we will make sure is linked. And
beautiful.
We're talking about something really interesting, and I'm going to tell you why it piqued my interest so much. So I also work as a consultant within this industry-ish. And what I mean by that is sort of this, I don't know, GLP-1 revolution, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes I work with brands. And then sometimes I'm asked to talk with different people about the perspective of my community. And as an advocate, right? And so I did have an opportunity to meet with some big food folk. And when I did, first of all, they were lovely. It was lovely. All the things. They definitely had a lot of ignorance around what it's like, right? And luckily, they were so open, like, to the discussion about what it's like for us, like people that with obesity, what it's been like for us, and all these different things. At one point, someone representing a very large food company that makes very delicious soups, said, like, kind of, what if I just put some protein in it? You know what I mean? And I was like, look, that sounds great. Like, we're all looking for more protein and blah, blah, blah. And food is yummy. And I was like, but I'm going to be honest. We don't trust you. And we don't trust you because none of us really understand, like, this, because obesity is multifactorial, right? None of us really understand the role that you have played in this, but we know that you have. So when you say, let me give you more of my food with protein in it to help you on your GLP journey, we don't trust it. And so if you want to fix that, then you need to try to fix the trust in your, like, messaging and what you're doing. Like, and then he kind of mentioned something about, like, something that they had done with, like, I want to say, like, skateboard. I can't remember now, but like another community in kind of the same sort of way. And I was like, yeah, I think that would be a really good, like, you need to involve the voices of these people if you want us to continue to consume your foods. We need to know what's in them and what you're doing them to make them better and all that kind of stuff, And at one point I said, I recently read an article. I swear I'm going somewhere with this, Liam.
No, you're fine.
Okay. I recently read an article, I said, about how there are people in big food that are trying to find a way, we can go into this later, but are trying to find a way to sort of hack this satiety that we experience with GLP-1s, right? So that we eat more of the food. And his response was, no, that doesn't exist, And I was like, So today I definitely want us to touch on that. But before that, I just wanted to, like, tell you, like, when I saw this video of yours, considering how big of a conversation protein is and muscle loss is, right, around being on GLP-1 or any diet, your video really broke things down in a way that people could understand it. I will put that video in the show notes so you guys can watch it. But Liam, could you explain that to us? Like, this piece of the protein and the quality of the protein and all of that?
Sure. So when it comes to protein, as you mentioned, it has become almost a buzzword as of recent. There have been a lot of, I guess, campaigns from different food companies to really incorporate more protein into their products and really meet the demand and needs of the broader consumer base. I say all that in the fact that we have and I say we as like a collective, sort of like the broader food industry, has received lots of consumer insights data into the fact that there is a growing population of people who are on GLP-1s, or at the very least, becoming more health conscious than ever. And I think, this probably started roughly around like 2020, 2021, like post pandemic sort of. I think that's when there was kind of like a big, like, can I swear on this podcast?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Right
So
away.
yeah, there was kind of maybe like a big like oh shit moment kind of for like a lot of people when there was like, oh yeah, okay, like this is like, these pathogens that can really like harm us out here. Like if I have confounding health variables and stuff like that can make me more susceptible to chronic disease or to even death. Well, damn, I should actually probably like maybe pay a little bit more attention to this stuff. So I think post-pandemic, a lot more people became awakened and more aware to the food that they eat, and more broadly speaking, like the food that's out there in the marketplace. So with that being said, nowadays, in 2026, like we're looking at this like from a lens of like, okay, more people are becoming more health conscious, more people are getting into fitness regimens, wanting to hop on GLP-1s to help them more easily attain their health and nutrition goals. I say that from a perspective of like, I know that there's maybe like a smaller population base necessarily need to be on GLP-1s, but they use them anyway to kind of help them accelerate their goals. Whereas I'm sure the vast majority of the population is like, no, I actually like really need this. So the overarching truth though is that like more and more people are saying like, okay, we are no longer really interested in these like kind of like fun snack food items, these packed good items as well. I mean, like the sales of like snack bars, snacks, honestly in general, convenience meals. I mean, they've been in declining pretty rapidly for the past couple of years. And so a lot of the companies now are starting to kind of be like, well, okay, how can we change either the products that we're putting out, or do we have to start new brands and stuff to kind of help capture this change in consumer sentiment? And that's where this whole kind of like protein sort of craze is coming from a consumer packaged goods perspective, in that they're trying to capture some of that audience that's now like, we need you guys to actually like give us food that we want to eat and that's actually useful to us. And so the thing is, and I talked about this a little bit in my video, is that not all protein is created equally. And unfortunately, most of the information that I go through in my video is simply just like not taught in schools, unless you're going to school to become a nutritionist, a dietitian, something along those lines. Like you really have to go out and seek that kind of information. Very similar to like taxes or investing. It's like, it's something you kind of have to learn on your own. It's not necessarily taught to you growing up. And of course, this is even more compounded by the fact that, most of us, I think growing up, we kind of take on any sort of dietary patterns, maybe from our parents or just the environment where we grow up in. So if we grow up in less fortunate situations and stuff that kind of doesn't allow us to have like fully balanced nutrition diets that can, titrate into adulthood, and those sort of patterns are really hard to break over time. That was a lot of word salad, just to kind of get back to the point.
No, that's not true. Yeah, it makes sense, yeah.
To get back to the point of like, not all proteins created equally. And the thing that I have seen personally from some companies and some products is that they really only care about getting protein on the label and being able to tell this is like, hey, this is like a protein filled item, or it's a GLP-1 friendly item. And the way that they do this is, for the FDA and USDA, they have certain thresholds in which that you have to meet in order to put on the label, like, this is an excellent source of protein, this is a good source of X, Y, and Z. And, like protein, that's also true for fiber, for vitamins and minerals, et cetera, so on and so forth. For sugar, And so that's like the most important thing to them, because that's the most marketable thing about the product is that like, what can you put on the pack to like, actually, it's the first thing that a consumer will look at and be like, oh, this just says this is a GLP-1 friendly item. This is high protein. I'll put it in my shopping cart and move on with my day. The message I was trying to get across in the video that I made was to implore people, make sure you actually read what's in the product and like on the label, and get an understanding for like the actual ingredients that these companies put in these products. So the example that I gave was that, okay, if you go to the grocery store and you find some sort of like protein filled muffin or something like that, and on the package says like excellent source of protein, GLP-1 friendly, all this kind of stuff. And you're like, oh, sweet. Okay, this sounds awesome. I can't wait to try this, whatever. And you look on the back of the label, and it's like primary ingredients is still like flour, eggs. Probably they're definitely not using butter. It's probably some sort of like palm shortening or something like that. Preservatives, whatever. And then like the main protein source is like wheat protein isolate or something like that, which to someone who's uninformed just might be like, the label says it's 12 grams of protein. So that's going to be like, that's a fifth of my daily recommended intake if you're going off of like a 50 gram RDA recommended a daily allowance kind of thing. And what a lot of people don't realize though is that like wheat protein is not only incredibly cheap, it's a very economical protein source for large companies to put into these products because they're producing such mass quantities of these things that in order to actually like make margins make sense on these sort of products, they have to fill it with, cheaper ingredients, more highly commoditized products, just because of the sheer scale that they're producing at. But wheat protein isolate in terms of digestibility scores, in terms of whether or not that's actually going to help you in your goal of muscle retention or muscle protein synthesis, is actually like a really low quality protein. And the way that dietitians and nutritionists talk about this is through something called PDCAAS scores, or protein digestibility corrected amino acid scores. So PDCAA. And what this score is basically it's a ranking system for proteins on how digestible is it for the human body, and is it a complete protein source, which is, does it have all 9 of the essential amino acids? And the ranking system is used for the USDA to basically be like, okay, this protein is, like it could say, for example, like this has all 9 essential amino acids, but it's really, really hard for us as humans to digest this protein source. So we're going to give it a lower score because it most of the time doesn't digest well. Or it's super easily digestible, but it lacks in 2 of the major of the essential amino acids. So we're going to have to bring the score down for that as well. And then the scores up at the top, the ones that are like 0.9 and above, which is considered like really, really excellent sources of protein, is mostly all animal sources. So like beef, chicken, milk, cheese, yogurt, whey protein isolate, if you're into protein powders and stuff like that. And then there are a few plant sources as well, like soy, and that comes in myriad different flavors like tempeh, tofu, edamame, stuff like that. But the ranking system though is super important to understand that that even exists, because since that I posted that video, I've gotten so many people that have like commented on it and saying like, I never even knew this existed. And to me, that's like, oh, that's insane, because like this is so important for you to know about, because it's like if you're eating a really low quality protein, thinking that you're actually like hitting your protein goals and doing something really beneficial for your body, you're actually kind of missing the mark a little bit. And I from a consumer perspective, like that, like myself, like that pisses me off that people like don't really know about that. And so luckily you can find these scores rather readily availably online. Like you can just look up like, okay, if you're ever curious, like the main protein source of this is like pea protein isolate or something like that. You can easily Google search like what is the PDCAAS score for pea protein isolate, and it'll pop up immediately like 0.8 or something like that. And generally speaking, if a protein source has a PDCAAS score above a 0.75, I usually say that's a good, if not great quality protein.
Okay.
If it's below 0.75, it's usually not the best quality just because it's either, again, lacking essential amino acids or is very undigestible by the human gut. Did that at all answer your question? I feel like I just
No, it did.
Like 5
I think
minutes.
it's no. I mean, I knew it was going to take a while. The video did. No, it did. And I think like the one thing I'll tell you is that when it comes to a lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of us in this community, it is odd. It is odd. Like, it's not just that we aren't interested in those foods anymore. It's that they don't taste good to us. Like a lot of us have had our taste change, and not just because we lost weight, it just did. And so when we would eat things like these things that have protein in them, like whether it's protein bar or, a very popular pastry that you take on the go that kids like, that recently added protein to it, right? Those kinds of things, they just don't taste as good as they used to. So even when you buy them and you think you want them, they're kind of like, Now, not everybody's like that, right? But that's happened a lot. And so then it's like harder to find protein unless you're going to eat, like you said, whole protein. And then people on GLP-1s, especially more so in the beginning and middle, right? I think of everything like a time journey. This journey never ends if you have obesity, but just like the journey on it, especially like I would say like the first like 6 months to a year, right? It is not always easy to get in enough nutrition. It's easy to not if you are not really, really being mindful about it, right?
Yeah.
And so then it feels like there's less and less options of quality protein, and we need something sometimes when we just got to get it in, we want to hammer it back. You know what I mean? And so I worry that we're, like you said, like that we are all focused on, well, that's got 30 grams of protein. Well, that's got 20 grams of protein. I'll just smack that back and hit my goals. And then we hit stalls and we hit plateaus and we lose muscle. And I think then we end up blaming ourselves and I don't know what the hell's going on. And I would really hate for a big piece of that to be because we're doing these like supplemental things, right? And they're not helping us at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is that is very possible and you really need to look into it before you trust it, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Go ahead,
one thing I wanted to ask you real quick, Liam, about the protein, and it's just because it kicked up an interest of mine because I'm trying to, get in more protein. I've lost a good bit of my muscle and things due to illnesses and things that have been, coming up. And I started actually with a wheat isolate. I think is how it's pronounced. It's very, very generic. It doesn't have anything in it. I think the company is Naked or something like that. It's just a very plain bland thing that you just put in, nothing with it. Are you saying that things like that is or that is not a whole protein?
Did you say wheat or whey?
I think you meant
whey. The whey. It's the
it's protein powder, but it just doesn't have any flavor.
Yeah, like it doesn't have any flavor whatsoever. I looked it up. I did what I thought was smart. I went on Google, went into Gemini, and I was like, hey, because I have IBS. I'm like, what things do they suggest for people with IBS? And they're like, okay, well, you want to stay away from things with high lactate count. And then it brought up this Naked brand, which from my understanding they're called Naked because it's very raw food. It's as close to its original form as possible. And this isolate that I bought, they said that it's the closest to the animal form of protein. I guess it's my understanding from what I saw is it's like, I'm guessing it's derived from milk in some way or fashion, maybe. Yep. So is that when we're looking for things like that, for things like this, looking for a protein, kind of like what I went with, if it's made from, like, let's say that we can look up, which I don't know if we can or not, look up and see what it's made from. If it was made from something like milk and then it's just basically dehydrated, which that's kind of like how it acted when am I tracking right, or am I really far off?
No, so whey protein isolate derived from milk is probably one of the best protein sources that you can purchase on the market. Incredibly well digestible. All non-essential amino acids. Like, I think whey protein isolate has a PDCAAS score of like 1.0. So it's like, it is quite literally like the best you can possibly get.
Okay.
So you're totally hitting the mark on that, 100%. And to answer your second question, yeah, you can totally look this stuff up and see like, okay, like where does this actually come from? So like whey protein isolate, for example, it actually comes from the cheese making process, because when you get dairy milk in for cheese making, what they'll do is they'll add something called rennet to the milk, which curdles the milk and adds it's an enzyme that basically breaks down the milk proteins, and it separates out the cheese curds from the liquid, or what's called the whey. And then that whey liquid that's left over is siphoned off, and it gets run through a bunch of different like ultrafiltration processes and stuff like that, and eventually gets down to the point where it's atomized or spray dried, which is basically they just heat the crap out of it and basically volatilize off all the water part of it. And what's left over is a really fine powder of basically pure milk protein. The awesome thing about whey protein isolate too is that even though it comes from cow's milk, it pretty much has zero lactose, because all of that has been completely filtered off. So even for people who, like yourself, like struggle from IBS, or they have milk protein, not milk protein, I was about to say milk protein allergies, that they cannot have that. But if there's someone who's like heavily lactose intolerant, whey protein isolate and whey protein hydroxylate, which is an even more refined, more like easily digestible form of it, far more expensive too. But people who struggle with those things can actually have that as an option still, which is really cool, because that, again, is probably one of the best protein sources you can have on the market that comes in like a processed form, if you will.
Yeah, I've noticed that I do digest it really well. I have not noticed any additional IBS issues from it. So I grew up out in the country on farms, really kind of saw the farm to table kind of version of life. And I know a lot of things have changed over the last like decade or so, but from a scientific standpoint, from kind of your standpoint and all, what has really changed with our food in the last 20, 30 years that has kind of led one to, I don't know, possibly being a contributor to obesity, as well as, kind of the things that are changing to maybe try to make things better? Anything from the synthetic meat things that we hear about. How has food and everything changed?
Food changes all the time, and food changes with trends, with consumer sentiment, with market demands. There are a lot of reasons why the food that we eat changes, or why the food that is available to us changes as well. We can look back to like the early 90s, and this like predates me, so I'm kind of like going off of references, but like the early 90s of like the low fat sort of craze, or maybe that was late 80s, I don't know, but like around that area, like low fat, people were kind of like, oh, fat is like the worst thing ever, like don't eat fat. So
that was
then,
90s.
That was 90s, okay. Yeah, the low fat everything. So then, okay, well, to compensate for this, like, we're going to have to start putting a little bit more sugar into stuff, because the flavor balance is completely off now. And then we get into like the early 2000s of like, oh, actually sugar is really bad for you now. So this is kind of getting into like Atkins, paleo, South Beach kind of diets, where it's like, okay, like maybe we should just be avoiding sugar and the refined foods and processed goods and stuff like that. And, get a little bit more further on into the early to late 2010s, where it's like the ketogenic diet is becoming super popular. And they're like, actually, you're all stupid. It's supposed to be like, this is what we're supposed to be eating. And and it's gotten even more like, we get into like carnivore diet, and ultimately kind of just is leading the way of food trends based off of a few different things. At the end of the day, though, it's all based and founded in the same goal, I think, and that's for people to either lose weight, look better, feel better, or just be overall more healthy. At the end of the day, I think no matter what the trend is, that's sort of like, that's the end goal.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to food from like a commercial production standpoint, there has not, I mean, there's been obviously like changes in like trends, and as we can see now, like with the whole protein, fiber, GLP-1 kind of like boom that's going on, we see like a lot more companies like making protein-filled goods, fiber-filled goods, goods that are basically like tailored to this kind of community to, for lack of a better term, I mean, kind of profit off the trend essentially, because otherwise, like their normal status quo business model is failing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, these large corporations, their main goal is to increase shareholder value. I mean, no matter what they say of like, how, like, they might be doing it in a sustainable way. They might be, saying that like, oh, we genuinely want to make like really delicious foods and stuff like that. And that could all be true. But at the end of the day, if it's, a publicly traded company or, that kind of stuff, it's shareholder value at the end of the day. So I guess food companies try to basically change with the times the best they can. Usually they're really slow about it. We'll see food trends change more so within like smaller populations first, and then it gets adopted by like either like small restaurants or maybe by slightly bigger populations, and then eventually over time it gets to a point where it becomes so mainstream that now it's like the giants of the food giants of the world are like, okay, now we need to actually change our course of action to kind of capture off of this, because this is no longer just a fad. This is something that actually has a lot of staying power.
Yeah.
And we're currently seeing that with the protein, fiber, more health conscious sort of approach to food.
Yeah. It's so funny because Kat, my co-host and bestie, usually, not that you're not my co-host and bestie too, Bear, but she's so funny. She's like, hell yeah, I'll take something with more protein and more fiber. And I'm like, I don't trust you. Like, it's so different, like different like perspectives, because like, it's like, I told her too, I was like, sometimes it's hard now to trust the doctors even, because like forever, right? They've been telling us, eat less, like move more, and like, this is your fault and you're lazy kind of thing. And now we've realized actually there's a lot more to it than that. You know what I mean? And I think that like sometimes it's even hard to trust this about face from the doctors. So we're sort of in this weird place between like medical and pharma and food, and like, who do we trust and what do we do? And some people I think probably care more than others, but
we're in an age of transparency. It's just like if you paid any attention, and I'm sorry to go off on a slight tangent at all, about the alien stuff going on in the last year and a half. They talk about the age of disclosure and how well, I mean, if like you pay attention, like they're releasing all this footage and stuff, right? Yeah. So they call it the age of disclosure. I think really what we're in for everything is we're in an age of people wanting information from everybody. They're wanting it from their doctors. We're wanting it from our food companies now. We're wanting it from our news outlets. Before, we're going to want it from everybody eventually, I think. I think it's turning around. It's not going to be people blindly trusting anymore. It's going to be, hey, you gotta show me now. Well,
I think that's true, Bear. I mean, like we talk about that a lot here, Liam, is like finding a way to advocate for what you need, whether that be answers or care, right? And I think probably even like with the age of AI, just like so much knowledge at your fingertips to be able to present it in a way that you understand it best, and being able to take AI into the doctor with you and like ask them these questions. So I do think we're at a place now where people do want answers, and I think it would be best if companies, especially even like big food, right, if they would seize that opportunity and be like, here's what's in it. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. There's a lot of language about the obesity epidemic, right? And the rise in more and more people being like in this high BMI, right? So I'm curious in terms of food, big food, or the changes that we've seen, for example, Snackwells, right? And these kinds of things. Snackwell, don't sue me. It's for educational purposes only. What role do you think that this process piece or the way that we do food now has played in contributing to the issues with obesity?
Sure. So I actually made another video kind of touching on this a little bit in that I have always been, prior to working as a food scientist, always kind of like on the periphery of the broader food industry and seeing how people talk about food from either like a nutrition perspective or like an ingredient perspective. As we've seen through the trends of the past couple decades, right? We see that like, okay, in the late 90s, early to late 90s, it was the fat that was the problem. Then in the early 2000s, it was sugar that was the problem. And then now it's like it's like how processed it is,
Carbs
there's artificial sweeteners. It's all these different things. And it's like from a consumer standpoint, it's like, well, then what the fuck's actually causing all of this? Because like there's something here, but it's like there's like so many different opinions on what the actual truth is. In my opinion, what I believe contributes the most to the obesity epidemic is a few things. One is that I think there's just a general lack of nutritional education. And that is entirely the fault of the U.S. education system. The lack of general education about the food system and just broader nutrition in general, I think is a huge contributing factor. I think there is, as many people are starting to become more aware of it and more, I guess, like into it, I still think there is maybe a broader lack of exercise. And this could come from the form of either like formalized resistance training exercise, or just like trying to be more passively active throughout your day. But generally speaking, for America broadly, is kind of like there's a lot of like sedentary lifestyles, like almost sort of I don't want to say like encouraged, but it's just like, I mean, it's the way we build our cities. Like we don't have walkable cities. There's like, if you need to go to the grocery store anywhere, for most people, it's like, you have to get your car to drive, that kind of thing. It's not like most European cities where it's like the grocery, the baker, everything is like, I have to walk there from my house, but it's like, at most like a half-mile walk kind of thing. So there's like infrastructure problems there too. And then, additionally, I think that a lot of people have just overall negative relationships with food, and that food insecurity can come from so many different places. So I used to struggle a lot with like orthorexia and kind of like binge eating disorder. So like being like super highly like neurotic about the food that I was eating. Like it would get to the point where like no matter if it was from a natural source or an added source, like if a food had more than like 5 grams of sugar, I'd be like, I ain't eating that shit. And so that did a lot of like psychological damage to me over time, in the sense of like, well, okay, if I'm going to look at food through a lens of like, this is like either like damaging to me, or this is something that like I don't have control over. I think for some people, like they kind of could get into a sort of like psychological state of, well, I just like, I feel like there's a lack of control here. And so I think, to me, in my opinion, that is what contributes most to obesity than individual ingredients within food. In speaking to like what a lot of people tout as like the food that's making us fat, to put it very crassly. No, like I've mentioned, there's been so many like doctors and experts come out into social platforms and be like, well, it's all the sugar that they're adding into our foods, or it's the artificial sweeteners that are adding into our foods,
or it's the red dye.
or it's the red dye, or it's like it's the seed oils. It's something like it's always something. The truth of the matter is that there is no single individual ingredient that is legal to put in food that can solely contribute to weight gain. And what I mean by that is like there's no special ingredient out there that we're putting into food to make things more addicting, to make it more fattening for people. Like there are definitely ingredients that are, I would say, net negatives to your health. Like trans fats would be an example. Not a huge fan of artificial synthetic food dyes, things like that. And, that's like there have been policies put into place to roll those out of our food systems. Like those are no longer allowed to be put into our foods, which is, I think, a good thing. But, as with everything, some of that stuff takes time to kind of like do the research, actually vet it out and be like, oh, okay, this is actually like, we don't need to be putting this in our food. And we usually are pretty good at figuring that kind of stuff out. But at the end of the day, in our current food system and with the food products that are currently being made on the market today, the USDA and FDA, as I know, maybe as disreputable as our federal government is nowadays, or maybe it might seem, the laws and regulations that are put into place are so strict. And like in order to get an ingredient approved by the USDA, it takes about like 2 to 3 years. And like that's like including clinical trials and human research on it to like actually vet it. Like, is this safe for people to eat? There are countless laws and regulations that are in place to protect the consumer. Now, with that being said, there are a lot of, I would guess, how I would say, psychological tactics that food companies do implement that can contribute to how likely someone is to purchase or repeat purchase or consume of in great quantities. So what do I mean by this? If I were to like ask you, Cam, if I were to be like, can you sit down and eat an entire bag of white sugar just by itself?
No.
Would you say that's like a remotely addictive thing? Just sugar by itself?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
But
dopamine hit alone,
no, not sugar like in a food product. Just sitting down and eating spoonfuls of sugar.
Yuck. No.
Exactly. Same thing with butter, right? I don't think anyone can sit down and eat like a whole stick of butter without. I mean,
I fucking love butter, but like I definitely not gonna like take a chunk of bite out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ask you that because it brings up to the point that there is no one ingredient that is considered addictive, and no company is now doing like the old Coca-Cola method of like adding cocaine into our food and stuff like that. That was washed out forever ago.
Yeah. That was real, right? That was a real thing, right?
It wasn't fully processed cocaine, but it was part of the coca plant.
You heard it here, folks. Food scientist. Okay.
Yeah. So, but sugar by itself, like no one's getting obese off of just eating white sugar. No one's getting obese off of just eating butter by itself. Yeah. Maybe they exist, but the vast majority of people are not. But people do get obese off of eating highly processed foods that contain sugars, fats, like shortenings or butter, or basically really yummy foods are really easy to overeat. And this kind of gets a little bit into.
Why do you think? What is that?
Why? It gets into human psychology and evolution a little bit. So back in the day when we were all hunters and gatherers, and there was a lot of food scarcity around, you didn't know where your next meal was coming from. Your body responded super well to very energy dense foods. So stuff that was really sugary, stuff that was really fatty and savory. So thinking like animal protein, animal fats, animal meats, berries, honey, that kind of stuff that we could forage. Our bodies really, really liked super sugary and super fatty foods because those things are way more calorie dense and they allow us to sustain life for longer, reproduce, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that those mechanisms in our deeply seated in our brain are still here today, where unconsciously our body seeks out energy dense foods. And so when you,
isn't that fascinating?
it is. And when you try to create a food product that, you're trying to make it as delicious as possible, you want to make sure that, you're including energy dense sources. So fats and sugars they have the same energy density as protein, but a sugar is usually a lot easier to eat in higher quantities of because it's less satiating than protein. And also adding flavor profiles that are novel and interesting to the human psyche. So, for example, a standard shortbread cookie, right, is equal parts flour, butter, and sugar. It's a super basic recipe, and if you're to eat it, it's like, okay, like this tastes fine. It's not bad. But it's not like, I'm not like getting super excited about it. But, you start adding in some eggs, some vanilla, some salt, some chocolate chips, you get a chocolate chip cookie. And then it's like, shit, like, okay, this is like a whole different thing. And I can eat like 20 of these things over just like a few of these. And so over time, and this kind of also gets a little bit into like how culinary arts have changed a little bit over time, because as we've grown and developed, as we've grown and developed as a species, we get more influence from other countries and other I'm blanking right now, like other civilizations, and we draw on their cultures, on their cultures, exactly. And we see like, okay, well, with like the Silk Road opening, there's a lot of spice trade going on. So like, you're getting spices from India, and you're getting spices from South America and from Asia and all this stuff. And then all these cultures start to blend, and we go from, in like the medieval era, where like, you were lucky to have food that had salt on it, to nowadays it's like you can go to like any restaurant and get like a steak or a chicken that's marinated in like 30 different things to make it like a super, super novel and like insanely unique experience. And at the end of the day, humans crave novelty. We want new experiences. We want things that excite us and kind of give us those dopamine hits. And so food companies understand this, and they're like, okay, we need to make really, really unique and craveable products so that people will come back and keep buying and buying.
That's why we have 500 flavors of Oreos, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why. I'm like, leave Oreos alone.
That's one of the reasons. And for them to also do like maybe some like fun celebrity endorsements and stuff like that.
Yes.
But yeah, ultimately, like, people crave novelty, right? And if you're just going to give someone the same thing over and over again, eventually they're going to get tired of it and they're going to want something new. And so companies recognize this as something like, okay, we need to ensure that whatever we're making is tasty so that people will buy it initially, but also make it novel enough to where people want to actually keep coming back for that, because they keep craving it. They get a hit of dopamine from that and want to have that same experience they had the first time trying it.
Interesting. Because they're looking for the experience.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of food is, in the way that we consume it, is experience driven.
Oh my God, Liam, I just had an aha moment. Okay, listen. So when I started GLP, and I also struggled with an eating disorder as well. Mostly because of all this stuff we're talking about. So listen, I had this thing happen where I was going like to get my hair done, have my time where I wasn't mom. I was, just going to get my hair done. And I was like, what am I going to get? Like, I want to go get I would get a boba tea, or I was like, oh, I'll treat myself to a hot dog. I fucking love hot dogs. Well, I used to, I don't eat them hard now, but anyway, but I used to love like, just get a hot dog and eat a hot dog. You know what I mean? Like, and I was driving the car being like, oh, I'm going to go get my tasty treat. And I'm on GLP-1 at this point. Right. And then I would go like to turn to go do it. And I'll go, no, I don't think I really want that. I don't think I really want that. And I had this moment and I realized that I didn't actually want to eat the food. I wanted to feel the way it felt to eat the food, but I didn't actually want it. And the separation of those two things for me was never possible. So like when that happened, it was crazy because I was for sure looking for the experience and then realizing that that experience wasn't going to feel the same. Right. So then I didn't want those things anymore. I passed by, didn't get the boba tea, didn't do any of it.
Yep.
Right. That is so fascinating. I never thought of it that way before.
There is an insane amount of human psychology that goes into designing food products and understanding like how, and not necessarily in like a predatory way, but just like at the end of the day, it's marketing, like, right. And so they're like, okay, how can we get people to come buy our product over other ones? And that's something that we look at. It's like, okay, like, well, what flavor combinations are trending? What are people like? What are like new ways to combine different things? Because like, you know, there are, and I don't know if you know, like the five like flavors, but like, you know, we have salty, sweet, bitter, savory, and umami. And so there's umami is like is a fun one. It's the most recently found flavor of the five, and it's kind of a sort of like a deep savory sort of quality. It's like if you've ever had like sushi with like soy sauce or something like that, it's kind of like you get that feeling in like the like back of your throat right here that starts to feel like kind of fuzzy, warm, and also like it's like there's meaty like qualities to it, but not quite meaty. That's like
a sushi is a perfect way, and it's so satisfying. Like it's just so I get it, but it's satisfying in a different way than any other food is.
It is.
Right.
I eat so much sushi. It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
But so with there only being 5 like major flavors that the human palate can detect, we have to kind of come up with unique ways to change around how those different flavors are presented to make it a more novel product. So for example, like with a chocolate chip cookie, if you look at something like the Toll House recipe, right, which is like butter, sugar, salt, chocolate chips, maybe like baking soda, eggs, and like a little bit of vanilla, right? It's like a super, super basic chocolate chip cookie. It's like how can you change that to make it more novel, make it more exciting, make it more addicting for people? You could do fun things like doing brown butter. So you're increasing the amount of like caramely toasted flavor notes that kind of build the depth of flavor. You could add white miso paste that also adds a little bit more depth of flavor, as now you're bringing in umami to the equation. So you have like a really unique characteristic that is like a slightly burnt caramely sugar, but not quite, but it gives you that sensation of like a really well balanced, like salty and sweet sort of cookie. Additionally, also has a lot of like caramely kind of notes to it. You can use different types of chocolates to add more bitter notes, to add more caramelized milk notes. You can add like a flaky topping salt to add a textural crunch to make it more visually appealing. You can change how long you bake it for, and if you bake it from frozen, at higher temperatures for a lower amount of time, you get thicker, gooier cookies versus like a thin and crispy cookie. So like all these are things that like us food scientists kind of like consider and have to think about of like, okay, if we're designing this, who's the target consumer for this, and how can we make this something that like people want to actually come back and you know have time and time again.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's funny, I don't think we ever even think about these things, you know. I'm wondering too, like, I feel like I hear this a lot from my parents who are boomers. And from their parents, like my grandma, like she made everything like fresh, right? There wasn't like there wasn't prepackaged things in their generation. And so they're always telling me like, you know, it's all the prepackaged stuff and the microwavable meals and like all the different things like that's contributed to obesity and stuff. And I'm wondering like, how much does this whole idea of prepackaged and preservative things play a role in, like, I would just say weight management in general?
Sure. So the actual notion of it being prepackaged and like containing preservatives, I would say I would push back against that directly influencing weight management issues. However, there is some truth into the fact that it's convenient as fuck. And it's usually depending on, like, you know, what kind of goods you're getting, it can be really energy dense. So like lots of fats, lots of sugars, lots of, you know, protein, stuff like that, in a super tight and compact meal that's like $3 and you pop it in the microwave and it's ready for you in 2 minutes. Like we are at a point in our history where like really delicious food is super easily accessible.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go out of your way to prep and cook an entire meal. Ditto with like desserts and stuff like that. You can just, and especially now, you can just DoorDash literally fucking anything that you want.
Yeah.
It's just like at your door in like 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like the barrier, the barrier to entry for overeating, especially if you live a sedentary lifestyle, is so easy.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's some truth into the statement that, you know, it's the convenience factor of all that stuff does really make it a lot easier for people to overeat, maybe either consciously or even unconsciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Or both. Yeah. I get it. I think that we see that a lot, and people that we talk about in our community, we talk a lot about food noise. Right. And, we also talk a lot about with the doctors kind of about how much of this is genetic, right? And then the fact that it is multifactorial. And just like you said, like there's things that we do, I think, as humans to gain control. And like oftentimes, like when you're a kid, maybe you're feeling out of control. One of the things that you can control often is your food, right? There's just so many things that play a role in this, that it's just sort of a crapshoot, to be honest with you, you know, but I think that, but I think as we move forward, right, we kind of see how food, we talked a lot about today, how food has changed and how it's evolved and how it's continuing to evolve. And I think the psychology piece that you're saying is not so much like the marketing of it, which of course is going to play a role. But if you know already you love Toll House, and then someone says, ooh, try our new brown sugar Toll House, then like the nostalgia and all the different things make you go, ooh, new. And then it makes you want to try it and buy it. And if it is delicious, it makes you want to have more of it. And maybe the more of it piece is what we talked about how the human body in general is seeking out that kind of thing for energy storage, right? Yeah. Does that track what you said? I want to make sure I understood.
No, 100%. Yeah. It also gets to the point of too, like these types of foods are just so much easier to overeat on than really like other conventional means. Like even looking at something like that's still energy dense, like a ribeye steak, for example. Like for me personally, like I'm like a decently like a big guy. Like I feel like I can eat a good amount of food. Like I can probably eat like a 1 pound ribeye and then like be full for maybe like 4 to 5 hours. Whereas like, you know, with that, the same amount of calories in the form of like a slice of chocolate cake or something like that, I can eat that in half the amount of time and then be like hungry again in like 2 hours, if that. And so it's like, it definitely contributes to the fact that us with our like, you know, parts of our lizard brain that are still kind of intact from, you know, haven't fully evolved outside of us. It does sometimes add just innate barriers to how we, you know, perceive food and what types of foods we seek out. I
think it makes sense. And you know, as someone, I don't know how much you've talked with people on GLP-1, but it is, frankly, man, like it's utterly bizarre. I mean, you get on these and just the fact that you don't know what you want anymore. Like a lot of people, like we don't really know what our taste changed. It's not everybody, but it's a lot of people. You know, our taste changed. For me, it's sort of one of my dietitian at the time was like, since you don't know what you want and therefore you don't really know what you want to eat because you don't really have the cue right now to be hungry and famished and want to do all the things, you don't have the noise. Like, let's experiment and let's find new things you may love. Turns out I absolutely love Brussels sprouts. And so I not only love them, but I crave them. And so like there are many things like that were these just in general, vegetables just taste so much more delicious to me, right, than they ever did before. And just sort of automatically this shifted. Now, there are things in life that have also shifted with stress and loss and things that have happened that have made me sometimes, I think, psychologically go and look for, you know, more of those, whether it's like the nostalgia of food or want to try the newest Oreo or whatever it is. I still find that I have on these medicines a certain level of satiety so I don't overeat them, which I think is what's key, right? But I can still have them, right? And like that piece of it, and understanding that and figuring out that balance is just so different, is so difficult. And it also, as we go through the journey and either get closer to goal or whatever it is, right? Because most of us aren't like, I tell people all the time, you're not on a weight loss journey. You're a sick person that needs medicine. You've taken your medicine, and these are the pieces that you can control. And that's your nutrition, your movement, and your stress management. And I only say that because I'm not a doctor. I just interview them on the internet, but this is what it comes down to, right? There's much of it that's not in your control, right? So, but like all these pieces, right? When you're trying to figure out the nutrition of what it's going to be for you now, right? But it's just so hard to find out what you like. And so I think like a lot of people do tend to steer away from the prepackaged stuff and the stuff that we used to have before. But in all fairness, at the end of the day, with different, I would say, I'm just going to say income levels, because I feel like that's the most equitable way to say it. It's sometimes very difficult to be able to afford, Whole Foods and stay on the outside, right, of the supermarket.
The perimeter,
Yeah. And so it's not realistic for a lot of people, And so I just think that like in general, this has become like such a conundrum. And because of that, and this leads me to my next question and my final one, I swear. How is GLP-1s like, knowing that this is something that's sticking around, right? Like, even though I think keto is like holding on by its like,
it's trying,
with all of this evolving and people, it's clearly evident that this is not shrinking, right? That it's only growing, and there's more and more data, more and more studies, more and more medicines, right? And so it's becoming more commonplace. And that would track, considering half of America has obesity, right? 70% if you can consider overweight. So it would track. So what do we think food's going to look like going forward, right? Knowing that this is a massive thing that is going to continue to probably change society, like not even the dieters, right? But like society, because 70% of America is a lot of people, you know?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I think to touch on a point that you made, because like you mentioned in your own experience, like with your dietitian, you talked about like how like, when you're on the drugs, it's like, I don't really know what I want now. I don't really know what I like anymore. We have noticed that, from like consumer insights and like consumer feedback studies that like the company that I work for has like, individually ran, and also like broader kind of informational data that's been casted by research studies and stuff. And we've noticed that like a lot of people are like, I really loved this type of food prior to the drug, and now I can't even like look at it because it's just like, I don't want this. And to be honest with you, a lot of companies are in kind of like a mad sprint to try and figure out, okay, well, we know that our consumer base is now like telling us that like they don't want anything remotely close to what it is that we're giving them. What is it that we can do to actually meet them like where their needs are? And so we're starting to see like large shifts in terms of like the types of products that companies are going to be putting out, the quality of the products that companies are going to be putting out, because the truth is that at the end of the day, these companies still need to, like, as just like any other company, continue to make money and stuff like that. And if they're not going to meet consumers where they're at, then they're gonna crash and burn. And so I think I see a lot of companies, at least over the next, for sure, like 2 to 3 years, continue to change with the sentiment of that larger population of people who are like, we really don't know like what it is we want anymore, but like we're trying to figure it out as we go along, and the companies will kind of follow that as well. To try their best to meet the needs of the consumer more broadly speaking. But as we've seen right now, like protein is the huge trend that's going on right now. But I think what's going to follow that, honestly, is fiber.
Fiber. I'm hearing it already.
I think fiber is kind of like in its like, I wouldn't say necessarily its infancy. It's been around for a while, but in terms of like how ubiquitous protein is now, I think fiber will be that ubiquitous in a few years down the line. And then from even, past that, I think we might even see like just completely new and different products out in the marketplace. I think that I don't necessarily know whether or not like specialized nutrition will take more of an impact than it has now. So, gut microbiome optimization, like that kind of thing, like building products around that, or building products around specifically people who have like type 1 or type 2 diabetes, or, X, Y, or Z, or this kind of thing. And so that could happen. But it's kind of hard to tell, just because there is, from the business side of it all, there's so much noise that has recently kind of shaken up the status quo for a lot of these companies. And just actually being a part of the board meetings a lot of the time and sitting in on these conversations, I do know that a lot of them are actually looking to really change the kind of products that they're putting out there and making to help meet the consumer where they're at.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that, it's not like they wouldn't make, Toll House anymore or shove protein in Toll House, right? It's more about just,
God, I hope not.
Thank God, right? We're screwed. But if they were to, I'm gonna look, free consulting. This is what I do, by the way. This is like my job. So, I'm gonna say, so with them, learning what you've told, like today, right? Where you were specifically talking about the novel experience, right? So if anything, people with GLP, especially in the beginning, are trying to be like, not everybody, right? But a lot of people are like, I don't know really what I like anymore. Like I mentioned to you, right? I'm not sure what to eat. I can't really eat enough because the things that I used to eat just don't sound good to me anymore. Whether it's because they're nauseous or just frankly, it changes and we don't really know why, right? In that opportunity, there, from a marketing perspective, it could be that you help them like experiment, right? And whether that, I think there's probably some campaign stuff like that you could do around that, and then that could probably inform, right, some of the things that you choose to make. I feel like a lot of people are liking less sweet things and more bitter and sour things, and so like I think there's a play there when you're talking about the different, like, what did you call them? The different tastes?
The 5 tastes, yeah.
The 5 tastes? Yeah. So I don't know, like just something to like think about. I think that what will help Big Food, in my opinion, is if you start working with us more, like the community more, and trying to figure out what it is that we need and want. And I know that's a lot of times hard to do because it's like patient data, but there are plenty of people that will be a part of like market research to figure out what that is. Because at the end of the day, I'll be honestly, and we all want to solve this problem because we all still like food. We all want to eat it. You know what I mean? We don't want to be sick anymore. So if we can find a way with Big Food, for them to stop making stuff that we ain't going to eat, you know what I mean? It's like a weird ass boycott, and you guys can make stuff that we like. That would be freaking amazing. I just think that, like you said, like the way of just like, let's shove protein in something we already had, which is more of like a quick fix and probably not the best protein that we need. Probably not the best decision,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. What you touched on there, in that, like, folks on GLP-1s are usually not looking for like sweet things; they're looking for more bitter and sour kind of thing. That's a super interesting thing you brought up, because this past year, so for those of you who don't know, there's a super large food industry trade show that happens every year called National Products Expo West, and it happens out in Anaheim, California. Stupidly massive, like, food convention thing, like hundreds of thousands of people attend. The biggest food companies in the world will go there to showcase basically like the new products that they're working on, new exciting prototypes, new science, like from studies that they do within their own house. And the number one thing that was like trending within that expo this year was bitter and sour foods.
Wow.
And snack items specifically. So a lot of the companies that were there were like, okay, we have like protein snacks, but they're like sour bitter protein snacks, or like savory protein snacks, or like just stuff that's like maybe like a little bit more like culinarily inclined.
Yeah.
I wanted to put that out because I thought like you specifically talking, I was like, oh,
that's so
like,
interesting.
that
I think we're all ready for some changes to the palate. So like whatever you can get out there for us to try, that sounds great. So Tell your clients we're ready. You know? Awesome. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. I want to make sure you can tell people where to follow you, although I will put links and all the things in the show notes. But if they want to follow you, because you make great content about this.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. My TikTok, which is where I primarily do most of my posting, is just big food guy. And my personal consultation business, if you are a small food business owner or someone like that who's just looking for would find value in technical expertise with food and all that kind of fun stuff, you can look me up on apothics.com. But otherwise, I'm trying to think what else. I have a LinkedIn, Liam Kincaid.
Okay.
You can follow me there.
You never know. We have tons of people that follow. Dietitians, doctors, chefs, bakers, like you wouldn't believe it. So you just never know.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Lots of people have obesity with businesses, so this is awesome. Well, thank you so much for helping us learn. I appreciate it so much. And other than that, I'll tell all the group, because I know we lost Bear because of stupid ass internet. But everybody, I will see you next week. Thank you for engaging. Please go leave a 5-star review, would ya? All right. And I love you to death. Hasta la pasta. Make sure you follow Liam. All right.
Thank you, Kim.
Quick pause here. I've had moments on my GLP-1 journey where insurance changes or rising costs force me to look for a new provider. And honestly, that process can feel very overwhelming. But that's why the Plus Size Podcast is partnered with GLP Winner to give our subscribers a resource to help them make that decision easier. GLP Winner is a comparison platform that lets you explore telehealth providers in all 50 states, whether you're looking for brand name medications or compounded options. You can see pricing up front, read reviews, and get a clear picture of which provider might align best with your needs. Check it out today at glpwinner.com/plus-sides. That's glpwinner.com/plus-sides. Don't forget the Z. Let me tell you a quick story. I was telling Kat how I was regaining weight after my 100-pound loss using GLP-1 medications, and I was having snacky cravings and waking up at 3 a.m. and I had hot flashes, and I was worried. But Kat was like, listen, I went through this last year. It's perimenopause, and I started HRT, and she used this company called Winona. So I started going there to see if this was something that was going with me. Turns out it was, because I'm 46. And it's been amazing. It's taken a while to find the right dose, but once I did, it's just been huge. I've been sleeping. I feel more myself again. And the hot flashes are gone, which is, geez, really bad. So I will tell you, it's just been so big for me. And so I wanted to partner with them on the podcast because obviously many of our listeners are going through this same age range and definitely are having these issues. And there's just no need for you to suffer. So if you go to the link that's in our link tree, you can click on that and save money. If you go there and you meet all the criteria, and this might be something for you to try. So I just want to make sure you have this great resource because it's just been such a big difference for me and Kat. Again, you can go to the link in our link tree and get what you need.
"20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise." That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.